Welcome to episode 4 of the Pool of Life podcast. In this episode, I am privileged and honoured to be with Skelly. And this episode, we're out walking in nature in the beautiful Rimrose Valley in North Liverpool. And it's a spot where both me and Carly respectively spend a bit of time, and Carly just lives around the corner. So thought it'd be a good idea to come out and do this interview in nature. So welcome, Carly.
Thanks, Neil.
So this is an interview we've been trying to do for a while, and I've known obviously yourself now for, guys, it's 3 years?
Yeah, I think.
It was 2 years ago in the lakeside.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you were there with Paul, and yeah, I think it was a Shefton Council business event.
Yeah.
And just randomly, I come and sat at a table, and there was you and Paul, and didn't know who you were, and straight away just started to get into deep conversations, and then it just transpired from there, and you become friends, and yeah, two people who I respect a lot. But this is about you today, and yeah, you've got a fascinating story that I've wanted to learn more about and share more about it with the Pool of Life community, about like who you are and what you're about and what you've been up to. Yeah, just get some of your philosophy of life, which is really interesting. So you've got a podcast of your own that you've up and running for a little while now.
Yeah, so it was actually Paul that started the podcast initially first, and then I joined him, and we've done quite a few episodes, but we pressed pause on it for a little while and relaunched a new podcast in August, the Who Am I podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we've had some really interesting guests the past couple of months, and yeah, just enjoying sharing what it is that we're interested in. And I think what a lot of people want to hear talked about a little bit more, because some things kind of push down and there's a lot of answers that people aren't always able to get. So we're trying to break down and yeah, get some interesting people on to answer some questions that we feel society would be really keen to know more about.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to a couple of those episodes, and yeah, it's just like, it's rich and it's deep.
Yeah.
And, I'll touch on some of the things with you today. We were just talking there before we started the interview around the education system and yeah, just life and society in general, because I don't know about you, and I believe you're of the same opinions, that systems are breaking down. We're going through massive change and transformation in many, many different ways in society. And yeah, I'm curious, again, as we go through the interview, to get your perspective on those, because what you've talked about in the podcast, both ways, just being you and Paul and some of the guests, has been, yeah, it's been intriguing and riveting. So yeah, so who have you had on? You've had Dr. Ed Lynch on.
Yeah, so the first episode was just the both of us, me and Paul, and we actually spoke about what you've just mentioned there, Neil. We spoke about the collective breakdown in society, covering a lot of parts of whether that be the school system or whether that be the medical system, and how we're seeing family breakdowns. We've then had Dr. Ed Lynch, so getting his, expertise on the medical background, but he's also a longevity doctor, so he talks about how we need to take ownership of our own lives rather than being reliant on the system, becoming more empowered rather than disempowering ourselves all the time. We've had Tony Robinson on, who is a footballer mentor working with young lads, young men, helping them on their own football journey. And yeah, we've got some really exciting guests coming up the next couple of weeks as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to just seeing how it all unfolds.
Ah, beautiful. Okay, well, for all the listeners, I will post the links to the podcast and in the show notes, so people can check out the podcast. I mean, I highly recommend it myself. It's especially the Dr. Ed Lynch one. Yeah, it was an amazing interview. But let's talk about you. So what are you up to at the moment? Tell me about some of what you've been up to recently, and then I'd like to start getting into a bit more of like what shaped you.
Yeah, so obviously we had a little chat before we started the podcast, and I believe things just kind of unfold organically when we allow things. So for the past couple of years, I've been doing a lot of work with women, supporting women in wellness, supporting women in their own transformation in life, helping women go beyond, trauma and moving through limiting beliefs. And I still do that a lot. But I've also in the past couple of years been working in the schools And I've started running programs with a friend who started this program a couple of years ago. And like I said, in the past 6 months, I've taken on more and more schools and feel there's a little bit of fire that relit in my belly.
Oh, because of the school specifically, or?
I would say so, yeah. So obviously I've got 2 boys, 18 and 13, and neither of them have ever liked school. Not high school. Loved primary school where things are still quite playful. But as far as high school, not so much. And my youngest lad now is 13, and we're having issues with, you know, silly things really, of like them constantly being really hard and detentions. And when you look behind it, it's really silly and petty. And it brought up probably a lot when I actually started working in the schools myself, of how we can often call children naughty because they're not obeying orders, but they're actually coming from very disadvantaged families, dysfunctional families, and there's absolutely no way, you know, we can't use the word naughty. They're in need. They're in need of support. And for us to continue to say these are the naughty kids, we're letting people down and the system's failing. So yeah, this has been something that's kind of really become a deep passion of mine, I'd say, for the past couple of months.
Oh wow. It's interesting about that word naughty, like how that could be reframed somehow.
Yeah.
But it hasn't almost got like a label being slapped on someone's, like, and then the child continues to be a certain way, and it's like, oh, they're naughty, and it creates a bit of a reputation, and then over time that starts to affect their opportunities in the school. Maybe that they're labelled as a naughty kid and what that means, but it's just like you say, there's different factors and elements that are contributing to that child being the way that they are in school, and how the system doesn't accommodate that in any way or factor that in systemically. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think when we did our first Who Am I podcast in August, we spoke a little bit about it then, about the school system, and we are labelling these children naughty, and what happens is they do begin to develop this belief system. So we're disempowering them, and I'm a big believer in empowering people to live their best lives. So if we're telling people, oh, you're naughty and you can't do this and you won't amount up to stuff because of your behaviour, then we're not really allowing them to blossom and aspire to what they could be. So we absolutely need to reframe how we word, how we approach these type of children. And I feel like the school system itself needs to take massive accountability of the mental health and emotional health issues we're seeing in the world. Because if we look at primary school, for example, kids are so creative and expressive, and it's slapped out of them the second they turn 11, and high school, and it's then reformed and conditioned. And yeah, I just feel like lately there's been something that just hasn't sat right with me, and I just want to kind of explore where this will all go and really try and support young people becoming the best that they can be.
Well, obviously, you know, my situation, like that almost sort of like explains my childhood experience, because I loved primary school for reasons that, you know, I won't go into, but it's like you say, it was more creative and a lot more freedom, and just the dynamics were different. And we're sort of a couple of years beyond where it was, just through obviously enjoying it and enjoying the experience. But then as soon as I went into high school, like just it's like completely changed. And obviously there's other reasons for that as well. So thank you for sharing that, because that was my experience. But I want to bring it back to you. So does that resonate in any way? Like, let's go back to your earlier years. Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. So where were you born? Like, and tell me a little bit about those early years, and then we'll touch on school, because I feel like there's a bit of a connection there, maybe to your own experience.
Yeah, so I was born Seaforth. Seaforth. Well, my mum's from Norrisgreen, and I think I lived in Norrisgreen with my mum maybe for about a year until she fully moved in with my dad. And yeah, I grew up in Seaforth, and that was where my childhood was. I grew up there, I went to school there. And I always say, this is something I say now, I used to always look back and say, yeah, I had a normal childhood. And I've recently been at an event, and I actually spoke to the women and said, we actually normalise the most unnormal and natural situations. Because when I look back now, as a woman with a lot more awareness and a deeper consciousness, it wasn't a normal upbringing in any shape, way or form. And when I was about 6 or 7, my mum's brother got murdered. And that was like a big pivotal point of probably where there's a lot of change for me and as a child. So my mum developed a lot of mental health issues around that time, and over time developed and had a couple of diagnoses. So she was diagnosed with psychosis and bipolar and OCD. So for my childhood, from the age of like 7 onwards, it was dealing with a lot of change. Obviously at the time I didn't understand it all, so that was why it was normal, because I only knew that. And there was probably times where she'd be a lot worse than others. If life was extra stressful, that would have flare-ups for her situations. And we just tried to make the best of it, really, growing up. But yeah, that was just like my way of thinking normal is. But it's only when you grow up, isn't it? And you look back and you think it wasn't very normal.
And it's at a particular age as well, where you look at like developmental psychology for children. You know, that 7 or 8 year old, that's like a key transition point where you're changing. You know, those formative years shape us, and you're right on that. Like the edge of where you're about to change, and there's this big disruption at home because of a murder in the family, and then your mum's obviously mental health challenges. But who was in the house then? Was you, your sister? You got a sister?
There was me. I had a younger sister and a younger brother. My mum and dad. My dad's got 2 sisters from his previous marriage. I've got 2 half sisters. But I see me older sisters, but as I was younger, it was more the 3 of us. So I was like the older one, really. And I took on, obviously, with knowing what was going on in the family, I became this kind of, I need to look after everyone, I need to keep everyone safe type of persona.
Like a parental responsibility, really.
Yeah, definitely. And
Child.
I can actually remember how I found out about my uncle. It was never through anyone telling me. We were told that they died in just a house fire with in the kitchen fire. And I had actually, so I was getting babysat. I don't remember, it was my nan maybe minding us. It would have been a neighbour actually, because all my family were in the court basically. And I turned the telly on. And the next thing I see, my mum or my cousins, like loads of people on the telly. And I was like, oh my God, everyone's on the telly. And the next thing, the presenter of, it was ITV News or something like that, started talking about this murder case. And that was how I found out about my uncle. So I felt like, well, no one's told me and I wasn't meant to see it. So I didn't really share that, and I just kept hold of that. And I probably developed a lot of sub-personalities maybe from that point of like, yeah, just keep everyone safe, protect everyone. And I didn't really share what I knew until probably when I got a lot older, maybe when cousins had mentioned it. And I probably told my mum, I was like, yeah, I seen you all on the news at the time. So, yeah.
Wow. So that's quite a significant event, hey?
Yeah.
That would have been a bombshell for the whole family system.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And the ripple effects of that. Wow. Okay, so from there, then you then obviously you went into high school. Would you say that you were still feeling the ripple effects of that going into high school and becoming a teenager? And because you talked about like the opportunities for kids, and you've been in the last couple of months, you've been saying about like really seeing the school education and the system, and there's a passion there. How old are you now? Again, remind me. How old are you?
I'm 38.
So we think about like these cycles in life as we go through like these rites of passage and develop, and you're at a particular age now where like you've gone into this environment for work and something's resonating with you, and I'm curious about how that might be connected to some unfolding purpose of yours, and how it may be connected to your experience of school and seeing the school system as you were growing up, and that may be serving you in a way that would have sort of fostered and nurtured your gifts. Maybe you just fell between the cracks.
Yeah, I think if we went back to like primary school and if I can think about my primary school, they're a lot smaller, the numbers, aren't they? So obviously when you're in primary school, you only have maybe 1 class or maybe 2. And I was quite sporty in primary school, and I had that support and encouragement with it. I was able to express, I was allowed a voice, I was allowed to just be who I was really. And even with all that going on at home, I probably hadn't really identified any issues as such because I was still just a young child. And I think as a child, sometimes we can be very resilient, things can bounce off us.
Yeah.
But it obviously lives within us. And it was more when I got to high school, maybe things began to unfold. And as we went into then a school of like maybe 8 or 9 or 10 classes per year, being in such a big place, I probably felt that I didn't really have a voice as such, and I probably lost my confidence in high school. Again, I was still quite sporty, but I was other people's opinions mattered to me. So I probably didn't live the way I wanted, but more how I felt I should live and followed, the crowd, the group. And a lot of people might have looked at me in school thinking maybe I was quite a confident person or maybe a leader. And I wouldn't say that was my true identity. I was always just trying to seek, validation. I wanted to be part of something. So that led me down quite a risky path, really.
In what way?
Going out with my mates really young and, drinking on the street very young, being around people who were actually older men, very unhealthy scenarios and situations, and got myself burnt a couple of times with, older men, grooming circles. So I had quite a turbulent time in high school, but as far as the school system, the school would just label that I was just like a naughty girl. And quite often told, oh, you'll never amount up to anything. You're not going to end up with any GCSEs, you're not going to do well. And in reality, I just needed somebody to see what was really going on behind the mask that I'd built. And I never got that. Nobody identified. I don't know to this day whether the school even knew that my mum has all these mental health problems, and she was sectioned a couple of times when I was in high school. So they just thought, I'm just coming in and just being challenging, and didn't have any emotional awareness or trauma-informed experience. And yeah, that just led to me thinking, well, I'm not going to find the attachment in school, and I found it outside of school in unhealthy circles. So I probably feel I was massively let down in such a very important and pivotal point of my life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it makes it sort of makes sense, because when we spoke before the interview and I'm speaking now, like I'm just tuning in, and it was like there was a curiosity around like how you're passionate about like what you're seeing with kids now, like, and you mentioned before, you obviously just explained now all the experiences, and like maybe the school not being aware, or people not being aware of what was going on behind the scenes, but what's the root of this behaviour?
yeah.
Why is this happening? Like you say, trauma-informed, empathy, with right questions being asked. So we also touched on as well about like the, qualifications and like GCSEs, and, that's the school systems around. You get your lessons, you need to achieve a certain number of GCSEs, and then, go and do your A-levels. But like for me personally, like having limited amount of qualifications has never stopped me to do anything. Now, if I wanted to be a psychologist or a scientist, for an example, then obviously you need them. But like outside of that, like it hasn't been a barrier to me in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So what GCSEs did you got? And
no, none. I didn't get one GCSE, and again, you think, well, without GCSEs, I can't really have a great life or go on and do anything great, because that's a story that is drilled into you, I feel, for 5 years of being in high school.
A story, though, that's the key.
Yeah.
It's just a story, it's a narrative, it's not the truth.
No, but it's being drilled and drummed into all of our teenage children in the world even. And yeah, when I left school, I got a job, started like a bar job. I actually started off in the kitchens because I was only 16. I think I went to college and I lasted a month. I was doing a sports college because I like sports, but I had no idea of what I really wanted to do. So after a month, I was like, no. Went and worked in a bar, started off in the kitchen and worked in a bar for a couple of years.
In Liverpool?
Yeah, Yates's in Bootle.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was where my first job was.
So just for people who aren't from Liverpool, there's a few of you. Like these are all areas in North Liverpool. So C4 for you grow. This is all North Liverpool, and almost like it's the dock area, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like Bootle and C4, and yeah, it was an area that was heavily bombed during World War II, and most of Bootle got flattened. But yeah, that's just to give people an orientation geographically.
Yeah.
Scousers will obviously know, but people outside won't.
Yeah.
So sorry, go on.
Well, yeah, I
Continue.
think I've been with Paul, my partner, now since we were 16. We got together actually in our last year of school. But we had our first child quite young. Wasn't really ready for the big bad world of like how to manage and deal with it. But that moment made me realise that I wanted something very different to what I'd had. So I actually went to uni. Now, obviously, I didn't have any GCSEs, but I'm a big believer, and I probably started to believe this as I got older, that if I want to do something, then I'm going to do it. So I did an access course at Southport College and got the qualifications that allowed me then to go to uni. Went to uni and got a degree in paediatric nursing and started working in Alderey when I was in my early 20s.
Which is a children's hospital. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Liverpool.
Yeah, so obviously, although I didn't come out of school with any GCSEs, I've still got a degree. So yeah, obviously, like you said before, if you're wanting to go into a certain profession, you might need them. But even if you don't get them in school, there are the loopholes, there's ways around it. And I actually found out after working as a nurse for years and years, it wasn't really what I truly wanted to do. So again, at that point, I had started feeling like maybe unsatisfied with life. And what actually happened is when I had my second, Thomas, I was 25, 26, I had a little bit of time out on maternity leave. And I ended up doing a charity fight, a boxing charity fight.
Like a white collar type.
Yeah, yeah. The reason why I did that, it was that my nana passed away. She's had Alzheimer's. And I felt like I wanted to kind of like raise money and do something just to give me a little bit of a push, maybe. I did it. I absolutely loved it.
What did you love about it?
Maybe letting a bit of aggression out. I absolutely loved punching, and I was even okay with taking a punch, to be fair. Yeah, I don't really know what exactly, but I absolutely loved the feeling of the adrenaline. Just completely like fell in love with the sport. So I then started to have a full change in my whole journey of work, and I spent a little bit more time as a nurse. But a couple of years after me boxing and being in the amateurs, I eventually turned professional. And
How old at this point?
29 was when I started, so maybe 32.
When you went pro?
Yeah.
So how many amateur fights did you have?
20.
And how was women's boxing, and what was the profile of women's boxing at that particular time? Like, was there much interest in it? What was going on? You know, because obviously you did the charity fight, you loved it, and that's what led you into it. Well, what was the profile of the sport for women for boxing?
It was actually really good. So I'd say probably a couple of years before I turned professional, women's boxing had really been on the rise. So I really fell into boxing, because I always say it was never planned. I fell into it, but I fell in at the perfect time. Because, you know, if I'd got into it 10 years younger, then there wouldn't have been as much available to turn professional. Whereas I think it was at a time where Katie Taylor had been boxing for quite a few years, and she'd been, made it really big, and she'd done well in the Olympics. And then we had Tasha Jonas, another Liverpool girl who'd got a bronze in the Olympics. So it was really up and coming, and people were really starting to respect women's boxing a lot more. So when I'd actually decided to turn over professional, there was a lot happening, and I was very, very lucky. And on my fourth professional fight, I was offered a big title fight for the Commonwealth title on Sky Box Office, on the Usyk and Chisora bill. So yeah, just an amazing experience to actually be able to say, like, I've, been on shows with some of the greatest of all time.
That's a top billing.
Yeah, like Usyk now is like undefeated. He's like done incredible things in the amateurs. He's 2 times heavyweight world champion. And yeah, I shared the same ring as him. So I've done really, really well. But going back to way before we even got this far down, and the question is, do you need your GCSEs? I think we've quite covered that. I've got a degree. I'm a professional fighter, and I didn't have one GCSE. So I think if we don't let like beliefs be the one that controls us, we can actually go on and do anything that we want to do in life, and we can always find a way around it if we do need to get something that maybe we've missed because we've been young and we've been unaware and we've made daft decisions. It doesn't mean that then closes off forever. We just might need...
Late.
No, never.
It's never too late. There's something I want to ask you, because, you know, to have, I mean, obviously wasn't spending every day with you in your late teens and what was going on, to sort of know where your head was at. But it feels like there's something quite catalytic that, you know, you went for the nursing degree and you did the access course, like, because you talk about like your environment shaping you and the importance of like mentors in your life.
Yeah.
And like, you know, maybe you are a bit lost, but someone sees like qualities in you that like sort of gives you some positive reinforcement. But it doesn't sound to me like that coming from anyone else apart from you.
Yeah, funnily enough, you said something about the mentor then. Only, I think, 2 or 3 nights ago, we were having a conversation and somebody had kind of told us something, and we got into a conversation then about like, who are your mentors? Who do you look up to? And the conversation unfolded where me and Paul were joining in, thinking about mentors that we had. And I remember Paul saying like he said he was the boxing coach for him when he was younger, but also for me as I started boxing when I was older.
It's that North Mersey ABC, he's a bit of a legend. Sid.
Yeah. So he's all boxed for Sid, but obviously he wasn't around in my younger life, so Paul had him to look up to. And I honestly, a couple of nights ago, felt so emotional because I realised when I've reflected, I didn't have a mentor and I didn't really feel like I had a guide. And it only hit me a couple of nights ago and I was like, it's a little bit sad. Yeah. So I can actually think, you know what, I must have had a lot of, you know, will and heart to really change the narratives and break cycles and go on and do what I've done.
And resilience.
Yeah, definitely.
So intuitively, I was on the right track then, because like it didn't feel like to me that there'd been someone who supported you in that way, to make that. Maybe there was like subtle support around, but like, you know, it sounded very much that had come through you.
Yeah, definitely. As my mum and dad have always been like, they've been amazing and they've given me what they can possibly give me. But they were maybe flexible in allowing me to kind of do what I wanted to do. And maybe I needed that little bit of a push. I think maybe sometimes at a young age, we need to push and guide it into something. Whereas I didn't feel like I had that specifically. And I've maybe had to make a few mistakes along the way to really understand and find myself and know what I want. But with that being said, I try and look at the past now of not being, you know, this negative, but all the pain I have gone through has ended up turning into purpose for me. It's made me a very strong woman, very disciplined and very able to make things happen. So I try and, you know, like I said at the very beginning of the podcast, I work with women as well. So I support women trying to transform their lives. Because I do feel like I am absolute like living proof that no matter what you've been through in life, you can turn it round, you can live a great life, you can achieve greatness. But, you know, we just need to do a little bit of work on ourselves maybe sometimes to figure that out.
Sounds like from pain to purpose.
It's exactly what I'd say.
From pain to purpose. So let's stay with that then, because like that's, and again, it's like one of the things that's always sort of impressed me about you, and, you know, seeing how you've developed as a woman, even in just the time that I've known you, you know, and all the things that you've achieved, like mindset's coming through very clearly. Like, give me some like absolute like essentials that you've done that supported you as a woman, for other women who were listening to this, that could help them? Like mindset being one of them, belief. Like, is there any standouts? And did you have therapy, for example? Like, what have you done?
So I would say before I actually started maybe boxing, there was nothing specifically that I'd done, and I just had this part of me that had developed of like, I will prove myself to the world and I actually don't need anyone.
Yeah.
And I think because I've been hurt several times, especially as in the teenage years when I was around like really unhealthy people, I used to think that if I do it all myself, then I can rely on me, so I won't get hurt. So I became quite you might even say a little bit controlling. I controlled every situation so that I knew it'd fall the way I wanted it to fall because I trusted me.
Yeah.
And I had very little trust for everybody, even the close people around me. And it was never because of them. It was just because of the unhealed stuff within me. But that became quite unhealthy, and I was kind of always driving. I was very, very masculine, and I was always overdoing, overgiving. And I think when I started boxing, I also started really working on me. So obviously, if you can imagine an athlete, and I work with athletes now and say, every little inch will make you a better athlete. So when I was boxing, I wasn't just training and running and all of that. I was thinking, what can I do to like win titles and be the best boxer? So I started doing little bits of yoga, meditation, and you've probably heard the saying, once you know, you can't unknow. A whole journey completely opens up.
Just opens up, yeah.
I went on a really deep journey of self-discovery, of self-transformation, of healing, of spirituality. And I found so many different modalities that I'd never, ever been aware that were out there, like somatic therapies and breathwork therapies. And with finding all of this, I began to really heal all the unintegrated parts that I'd been carrying from my whole adult life. And this was, again, when there was a lot of change for me in my profession because I'm boxing. I'm still partly nursing because I joined the agency so that I could really focus on my boxing. But the more work I did on me and more of this uncovered, I started to think, I don't feel I want to nurse, because if you think of nursing, it's the Western medicine. It's not the everything. Yet we need a doctor. And if we looked at the podcast that we recently did with Ed Lynch, the NHS is only there for when we're sick. It's not there to make us well.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people are missing it. We're relying on the NHS for everything. But when we actually start to find out what's out there and become empowered as a human being, we can really live well and actually thrive, because I feel like a lot of humans are surviving in the world right now.
Yeah.
So with finding all of these different modalities, I actually went and started training myself in a lot of them and left nursing. And basically, when I eventually got to the point of me boxing finishing, I set up my own business, set up my own, with me and Paul, set up the community interest company. And I do a lot of work supporting women through like, trauma, through just being lost, being disconnected, through a lot of these different modalities I've learned. So going back to the question of, is there absolute any must? Knowing yourself on the deepest level, doing the work on yourself, and really knowing what it is that you want so that you're walking your path and not someone else's.
I mean, that's huge. And yeah, that's sort of now coming out of the other side of the boxing and letting go of nursing is when I first connected with you. And it was interesting because after we met that time for the first time, and then I met you a couple of times since, and then knew what you were doing with the boxing, I'd actually mentioned this and commented this to my ex-partner not so long ago. She's got a martial arts gym in Crosby, and I was saying about you. And I was like, the first time I met Carly, like I was surprised how feminine and soft that you were, given what I'd sort of perceived and, seeing about boxing, you have a certain, like, perception, but, like, you were really soft and feminine. I mean, I'm sure you can be very masculine, can kick people's heads in.
Paul, if he was here right now, I'd like to think.
But my experience of it, yeah. I haven't got on the wrong side here, yeah. But that is, that was interesting, even me, but like how feminine you actually were at that particular time, given my misperception. So the breath work, let's talk about some of these modalities, because I remember I'd just not long got back from New Zealand, living overseas, and I did a breathwork class with you and Paul in a place called Inaguru in Liverpool. And what's the breathwork giving you? Because it's such a powerful process for people who've maybe not done it before. It's a profound experience, can be.
Yeah. So I found breathwork, like I said, I was on this journey of really knowing myself, and it initially started with me, maybe wanting to be the best boxer. And then I started to do a lot of practices where I was really getting to know me and realising where there was unintegrated parts, unresolved parts. And I did a breathwork session, and it was in a group. And what that did for me that day was reopen subconscious memories that I'd really buried away and I hadn't really resolved or dealt with. And some of those memories I had no memory of until that breathwork session. Now, that actually brought a lot up for me, and it was quite challenging. And I ended up doing a lot of work with a psychotherapist for maybe a couple of years after that. But we did a lot of breath work together as well. And the change in me as a woman, as a human, was massive. And I thought, if I could take this to women who have been through similar things, women who have been through abuse, women who have been through sexual trauma, and I can kind of help them heal these parts so that they don't feel confined by their past and can actually go on and live a powerful future. That's going to be amazing. So I went and studied in it. Now, I trained in conscious connected breathwork, which is a breathwork where it allows, basically we have this fascia. Our fascia is everything that holds everything together beneath the skin, this connecting tissue. And we hold a lot of memory there. So we don't hold just memory in the subconscious brain. We actually hold it in the body. So when we do this type of breath work, this fascia allows us to really let go of maybe some of the memory that the body's holding on to, so that we can walk through life with more ease. It's very linked to our nervous system. So we've obviously got our sympathetic, which is our fight and flight. We've got our parasympathetic, which is the calm. So we're learning to reconnect to our calmer states and find clarity in life. There's so many more breathwork. So I've continued my studies and went and trained as a breathwork science practitioner to learn a lot more. But going back to then, I think about being a nurse, I very first started on high dependency unit, which obviously we've got really poorly. So high dependency unit as a nurse was like your one below your intensive care. It was your critical care.
So demanding environment.
Yeah, very demanding. And it's only when I look back at it now, and I think we've got kids coming in with all of these respiratory problems with the lungs, but we never ever really examine how they breathe. And now I know what I know. I just think I would work with people so much differently if we can get people to breathe functionally, because 90% of people, Neil, breathe dysfunctionally, which means we're probably living in a heightened state, which means we're constantly having higher levels of cortisol, which then impacts our immune system. So we're actually we can be causing our own sickness just through breathing wrong. Now, we don't...
That is like, let me just so, me and Carly are walking through the Rimrose Valley, and we've just done a hard stop because that's huge what you just said. So through not breathing properly, that becomes chronic. The effects of that systemically within the body are huge because we're in constant fight or flight, inflammation, like always in a state of the chemicals that are being released into the body. Like that's massive.
Exactly.
I mean, it's okay if you're getting chased by a tiger as a one-off, but like to live that way each and every day through not breathing properly.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And if you think of it, if you go back to the very beginning when we said about the collective breakdown in the system, if we're unwell, we need the system. So the system will throw us prescriptions.
Pharmaceuticals.
So you can see where that would go. Whereas that is disempowering us, because in reality, we are an internal chemist. So if we change the way we breathe, we can change the hormones that we release within our own body. If we, even just as simple as eating different food, again, change the chemical balance of our own gut and our serotonin, which is a really good feel type hormone, we are making ourselves more well through our own power as a human. But when we rely on the system again will give us prescriptions, pharmaceuticals that suits the system, but it doesn't suit us as a human. And it's only when we know this stuff that we can actually change it, which is why it's so important to know yourself on the deepest level.
So, but I'll put you on the spot, or I feel I already know the answer to this, what you'll say. But do you feel like that as human beings, we're conditioned to be reliant on a system that's external to us rather than internal through, without being cynical, there's money involved around pharmaceuticals, for example, that there's the answer, there's your, and the GP's even pushing the pharmaceuticals based on symptoms that we're presenting. It's like almost like there's an intention and a design within the system to keep us a little bit sick.
Absolutely.
Without sounding too cynical.
So, yeah, I don't know whether we've got long enough for that. It's just opened loads of things in my head as you were saying that. And again, going back to the first podcast that me and Paul did in August, we spoke about even the things of like the feminist movement. So the feminist movement that began around the 60s, where women, were fighting for this more equality. And it served me, because I wouldn't have been a professional boxer if women didn't have more rights. But at the same time, if we look at where these initiatives were funded by, the feminist movement was funded by the Rockefellers.
Okay, well, it's starting to smell a bit.
Yeah, so what we can say, if we were to unpick all of that and be real, two parents working, not empowering women, but actually pushing an initiative of like, okay, I'm going to have two parents working now, which means we're going to have more taxpayers. Children are going to have to be put in childcare or in the system. And if they're in the system, we can form them in a direction that we feel is a good way to direct people. Less empowerment and more reliant on a system.
Yeah.
So that's keeping it quite short.
I'm sure we could open that up a lot more, because it's like, again, I can share a similar opinion. I've questioned this and I don't know the answers about like I'm all for equality, and certainly for female empowerment. I grew up single parent, only child, and I know what it was like for my mum, going out and for work. But when you've got the two parents both at work, I mean, if you think about it, takes a village to raise a child. We look at more traditional cultures where, that's not like that at all.
No.
And so like you're maybe going to work full time, both parents having to put the kids in childcare, you've got like a nanny picking them up from school. It's like, there's a disconnect there somewhere for me.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's by design again, like what you say.
So much of it is by design. Funnily enough, you said that I shared something on my story today. I can't remember the exact words, but it was something about we're chasing this big mansion and separating ourselves from our families and applauding ourselves like we've won. But that was never really the way. We're meant to be in communities.
Yeah.
And we're meant to be around people. Like our nervous system is wired for connection. But we're moving further and further away from that by following the systematic way. And that's why, again, the more you know yourself, the more you know that something doesn't sit well and something's not quite right. And you can then really find your own path of like your path, not, the patriarchal system path or the pharmaceutical or the medicine or whatever path it is. It's like your path.
So what I found was that the more, and you touched on it, is that the more I worked on myself, I felt very fortunate that I had the opportunity to even have okay, let me go back, because there's a question. So when you're working with a lot of the women, what I found with people around me, and as I've gone through my own process, is that people don't want to change.
Yeah.
And people are scared of change. And the pain of staying the same for all is still painful. It's more comfortable to stay in that than the short-term pain of making the change that'll actually get them to a better place, but it's more intense and more painful, to actually go through that process of seeing yourself as you are. But just going back to the other question, is like the fact that the more I did work on myself, the more I could see. And like you said, the more you see, the more you can't unsee, and so it just creates like this process that you're on, that the door closes behind you, and you just got to continue going.
Yeah.
Because you then build more trust, you build more sensitivity, you feel more, you become, when you become more connected to yourself, by default, you become more connected to others. And then there's a nature part in this as well. So, like, how does nature connection come into it for you? Like, how would you feel when you're in nature, and how important is that for you for well-being?
Nature is one of the most powerful ways of healing. And yeah, we don't even give it as the credit it deserves. When you think of it, we are nature, we're the elements, we're water, we're fire, we're air. And the more we're disconnected to nature itself, the more we disconnect from ourselves. Now, the way I feel like we are living in humanity is we're living in a concrete jungle. We're not living in healthy ways. If we go back to like tribal communities, men and women would, be in like communities together, aunties, uncles, sisters, like there'd be so many of them. And the men would be out hunting and gathering, and the women would all be there in connection together. Children wouldn't really need to cry because there'd always be somewhere to pick them up. Now, we again go about how the system tells us to be. They're trying to put women back to work, sometimes even 4 weeks after childbirth. Now, for the first 3 years, it is so important to have that connection with the child, with the mum. And we're not getting that. And that is obviously coming out now. The byproduct of that is emotional and mental health. Now, we can only look at the statistics.
For kids, you mean?
Yeah, in children's mental health, it's the worst it's ever been. But there's more women at work now. And again, this isn't mum's parents' fault because we don't know this. But when we actually think about how we're meant to live, we're meant to be with our child for the first couple of years while they're imprinting their emotional body.
Yeah, okay.
And the nervous systems are still very, they need co-regulation. So if they're being pulled away and put into a childcare, you only have to think of how many children per staff. They're not having their needs met as a young child. That has an impact on them later on in life. And again, this comes from a system making two parents work.
Well, it's a lot to think about, eh? And then when you frame it in that particular way, I mean, I'm sure there'd be many people who'd argue for or against, but like I resonate totally with, what you shared, and I've trained extensively in family constellations, and the importance of that time with the mother and the child, and how that the nervous system is, we call that co-regulation, because the nervous system, the more I learn about the nervous system, the more I speak to people, the more I believe it's everything.
Yeah.
And I interviewed a somatic experience practitioner, April, in the last episode, and we touched on where we going, and quite deep actually in the nervous system. What you feel and think about the nervous system, like what's its role and how important is it?
It's how we, perceive the whole world. Like what's happening
Which is
inside our
everything.
body.
Yeah.
We're always looking for those external cues. So if our nervous system at a very young age has become disconnected and we're not having the needs met because the nervous first desire is connection, then we are putting ourselves into the more arousal state, so the sympathetic nervous system. So it's everything, and for me it's the first point of call when I work with anyone. It's understanding where your nervous systems are, because when we know where your nervous systems are, we can try and work with it to bring it back to balance. And we can then look at trying to rewire how it perceives the world, to find safety in the world, to find safety within yourself.
Safety and belonging.
Mm.
Yeah, belonging is a whole other conversation. So, like in a very practical way, then, when you're thinking about maybe there's a woman out there who's listening to this podcast and there's resonance with what you're talking about, and maybe she want to work with you in some way, and she come and see you, and you identify that there's nervous system dysregulation. Like, how would you co-regulate that woman or that child? What would you do in a practical sense in a session?
So usually I will, again, what we spoke about before is the breathing practices.
Mm.
So I would instantly be able to understand where their nervous system's at just through observing how they're breathing. And then there's a couple of tests that we could do to manage and understand their stress levels, how they respond to stress, again, all through breathing practices. And from that point, I would tend to prescribe a breathwork practice.
Not pharmaceuticals.
And that's simple, saying go away and practice this breathing practice, and instantly, with a little bit of time, that can start to rebalance your own nervous system. And then, you know, we can explore that further. So firstly, it might just be something as simple as functional breathing. So if we've got a dysfunctional breathing pattern, then we're going to have to rewire how we breathe, and that's going to take a little bit of time to repractice. Once we've got to that point, we can then really understand how quickly maybe we have stress triggered within the body, and then learning how to become more resilient to stressful situations. Because I'm a realist as well, and there's no way in this life we can go without stress, and we're not going to go without, you know, pain.
There can be healthy stress though, by the way, as you know.
Eustress. We have de-stress and we have eustress.
Okay, what's the difference?
So if we're in de-stress, so if you think of when we're on waking, if we look at the circadian rhythm, and what happens is maybe about 30 minutes before awaken, our cortisol levels start to release within the body. Now, that will continue to be released all day till so long before bedtime. But what happens is when we're having stress in the day, although that cortisol's already pumping, a stressful situation happens, the amount then will influx and increase. Now, if you think of everybody's day, working hours, stress all day, so the cortisol that's been released naturally, because that is the hormone that, you know, gives us a kick up the arse, it gets us out of bed, it gets us moving. That's okay, and that's when it's eustress. Same even if you think of me as a fighter, me getting into a fight, that was, you know, I had to manage my stress levels. So getting into the ring, I knew that was my job, and I was going in and I had a point of winning. So again, that was eustress. But if I'd have let that event overtake me and be terrified all day long, the amount of cortisol I would have been releasing in my body would have been a lot more, and that could have led me to having more injury, because it would have impacted my immune system. So I've become more likely to get unwell, more likely to get injured. So this is when the de-stress kicks in. Same for a human. So for an athlete, you're more likely to get injured. For a person just in an ordinary day, if they're overly stressed, will become unwell. Now, one of the biggest killers is stress, because if you look at cancer and diabetes and strokes and all of these different type of health conditions that we see on the rise in the world, they're more likely to happen when we've got very high levels of stress in the body. So stress is the biggest dominator in the world of us all.
So it's so the stress is there, is the catalyst, but it's the chemicals that are being released into the body that are causing the problem chronically. Yeah. Because if you think about as well, let's think about your typical person going into an office Monday to Friday with the stress that's involved, even the environments, like we think about me and you here now, we're walking, look, as we turn back, there's a beautiful rainbow behind us.
Wow.
You know, we're in the Rimrose Valley, it's beautiful, you know, and it's like, you can feel this, and this is a beautiful way to be having a conversation. But if you think about someone who's working 9 to 5 in an office, stressed anyway, but then you've got them strip lights.
Yeah.
They're almost like in a coupe at a desk. I mean, I know you can walk around, you can go get cups of tea and you can go have conversations, but typically most of that day you'll be in the office.
Yeah.
In that environment, which just compound the stress, do you know what I mean?
And how many people want to be in the jobs again? You know, if they didn't know who they are on the deepest level, they might be in a job that they don't particularly love, so that's going to amplify the stress, isn't it?
But not know that there's maybe something different, and it is possible.
Yeah.
It's coming back full circle to, you know, what you were talking about earlier, around that you can be anything you want to be, in a sense.
Yeah.
And you don't have to just accept that where you are is that's it, final. And you're going to be working in that office job for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's it. Retire, done, put your feet up.
Yeah,
There's so much more.
Yeah, we're going to have stress in life. It's just knowing when it becomes unhealthy levels, and that's the big thing. And that's what I work with, is if I know that somebody's got high levels of stress, then it's like, okay, so can we get out of this stress? You know, can we change the situation right now? And sometimes it's a no. Sometimes the women say, I can't really change everything outside of me right now because I'm in, you know, it might be that the caring for the parent who's terminally unwell. We can't change that. So what I would then work with is, okay, so how can we manage your resilience to stress? And that's where there's breathworks again, where we can help them become more resilient to stressful situations. This is obviously where, when I was boxing, it was absolutely incredible for me to learn to become more resilient, because I'm walking into a ring, you know, and somebody's coming at me there to punch me head in. So we can become more resilient to stress, because what we sometimes get, and people get a bit lost on this journey, is we need to remove all stress, and that's impossible. That's like saying we need to be positive all the time. Negative always comes with positive. Stress will always come with life, but so will joy when we allow it.
That's an amazing point you just made, because, like, you know, it's not just an external change, it's an internal change.
Yeah.
Because it's where, you know, your internal blueprint meets the external environment. Like, you can take the stress away, but it's only temporary, but then you put yourself in a slightly stressful environment again and you're triggered again. So it's like it's only short-term change in your environment, you know, like you say, it's an inside job. But just something that you mentioned about the boxing there, just as I imagine myself being you in that ring with all those lights, with all the people, like, you know, when you think about like a spiritual practice, the level of presence.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can touch on mindfulness, but being completely present in the moment, it's almost like, even though it's a martial art and you're fighting, it's a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, if you lose your presence and you become emotional, you're gone.
Yeah.
I imagine.
No, definitely. And I've, like, a lot of people, like, I'll talk to about their experience in the ring and, you know, how did you feel? And a lot of the time people will say, oh, I can't really remember it all. It was just like, yeah, I was just dead nervous, because they've lost presence. And
Dissociated.
Yeah, maybe, or the stress has been quite high that they've come out of there and they can't really remember all of it. And I think that is when we're letting stress sometimes get the better of us. Maybe they still come out and won, but they're a bit like, oh my God, I don't even know how I won that. Like, what happened?
What just happened, yeah.
But I can remember getting in so many of my fights, getting in the walk, the actual shots thrown, because I was present in there, because I used to think, I chose to do this. I actually love what I'm doing. So yeah, presence is a real deep practice for so many of us. But I think when you're really truly doing what you want to do, and when everything's aligned, you will automatically connect to presence. So if you struggle with it, maybe we need to reconsider, are we doing what we love?
God, this is you're throwing some things in here that could be a whole of the podcast interview. And we're just running out of time now, so I'm going to start to bring this to a close a little bit. But this has been, it's a nice way to finish with the presence aspect of it. But this has been an incredible conversation. And yeah, I've loved hearing, like, your life story and how these different influences have shaped who you are, and anything's possible. And I'm wondering how, you know, what people could work with you in some respects. Like, what's the work that you're doing at the moment? You're doing obviously a lot of work in schools. Have you got anything coming up, or do you work one-to-one with people? How does that look?
Yeah, so obviously I work with the schools and running certain programs, but outside of that, I run different courses, women's courses, all around, you know, becoming the best version of ourselves that we can, whether that mean working on our traumas, letting go of past stories, or just creating new belief systems and just rewiring our nervous system. And
potent.
Yeah, I work with a lot of different organisations. So I work with companies and organisations that work with women who've been through domestic abuse, rape and sexual assault. But I also do it independently from these organisations. So usually women would reach out to me through my Instagram page.
Okay. I'll post the link to that on that show.
I am an absolute dinosaur and refuse to move with the time. So that is my only point of call, I think, is Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes so people can contact you if they're interested. But I also encourage anyone listening to check out Carly and her partner Paul's podcast, which will also be a link here. But just before we wrap up, for anyone that's listening, what is one thing that someone could do after listening to this podcast that will improve the well-being, change the belief in a positive way? What's one thing that someone could do? A little takeaway. What would be one?
I would definitely say getting out in nature. I think we obviously had a conversation before this podcast started, and I've had a few interesting things, shall I say, the past couple of days. And already being on this walk now, I feel a lot more grounded and a lot more spaciousness within me. So getting for a walk in nature and also having a breathing practice. I recommend everybody to have a breathing practice. You know, there's so many that you can find on YouTube. Flow breath is a really powerful one where it's trying to slow how we breathe. So we're only going to take about 6 breaths per minute on average. Most people breathe 15 to 22 breaths per minute. This brings us down to taking 6 breaths per minute. And what it does is it helps us activate our parasympathetic nervous system, bringing us into that rest and digest and calm state. Again, these type of breath works can be found on YouTube, on the internet really easily. So a flow breathe and a walk in nature.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, I'll take both. Thanks. Yeah, awesome. Oh, thank you, Carly. It's been a privilege. And yeah, the best of wishes with everything. And yeah, maybe interview again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Neil.
Take care.
Thank you.